Santa Monica runs on more than sunshine and ocean air. It runs on good information. The Santa Monica Daily Press delivers the local news you need every day, free and independent. But free news isn't free to produce. That's why we need members like you. Join today at smdp.com/membership. The Santa Monica Daily Press, keeping our community informed. Hey everyone, it's Brian. This series sometimes contains adult language and may not be appropriate for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. And a reminder to please follow the series and tell your friends. Your support of this podcast and local journalism is both needed and appreciated. Thanks. On January 18, 2012, then California Governor Jerry Brown gave his yearly State of the State address inside the Capitol building in Sacramento.
Fellow dignitaries and fellow citizens, as required by the state constitution, I'm reporting to you this morning on the condition of our state. Before I do,
addresses like this generally come in two parts. The first is the current state of things, and then there's the crystal ball, the foretelling of a prosperous future. In this speech, one of the highlights of that future was a very ambitious project, high-speed rail.
Now, just as bold is our plan to build a high-speed rail system connecting the northern and southern part of our state. Within weeks of a revised business plan that will enable us to begin initial construction.
High-speed rail was not new. In Japan and China and France, it had existed for decades. Sleek bullet trains whisking their passengers around at more than 200 miles an hour. But there was no high-speed rail in America. If Jerry Brown could pull it off, California's system would be the country's first. Imagine waking up in LA and having brunch in San Francisco. No airplane required. It would cost tens of billions of dollars and take years to build. But confidence was high.
It's now your decision to evaluate the plan and decide what action to take. Without hesitation, I urge your approval.
More than 13 years later, California's high-speed rail project is mostly known as a fiasco. $15 billion have been spent, but only 60 miles of track laid, and not a single train ride. Big, ambitious projects are hard. They require lots of money and great ideas and broad consensus. California's biggest project of all is housing development, and there's a danger that it, too, could go off the rails. Can housing be done right? Can we make the hard choices that big moments demand? Is there a plan we can all believe in? I'm Brian Peter Falk, and this is A Developing Story, a limited podcast series from Santa Monica Daily Press. We'll explore housing development one story at a time and try to figure out what those stories tell us about the future and ourselves. This is Episode 6, The Crystal Ball.
This podcast is supported in part by the Montana Avenue Merchants Association, inviting you to experience the best of Santa Monica. Montana Avenue is home to more than 150 shops, cafes, and restaurants across 10 walkable blocks. From boutique fashion to fitness studios to coffee bars and gourmet dining, it's where locals and visitors come to shop, dine, and unwind. Plan your visit today at montanaav.com.
This final episode is about the future. But before we talk about that, it's important to acknowledge that the future is shaped by the present. So here's what right now looks like. The state of California is in desperate need of housing. State mandates are being tailored to put that housing in places just like Santa Monica, with jobs, access to mass transit, and a good school system. So Santa Monica is the perfect place to judge whether or not California's housing plan is actually working. The short answer is, it's not. The requirement of the latest housing element, nearly 9,000 new apartment units in Santa Monica by October of 2029, is not doable. For all of the hand-wringing about that unprecedented number, Santa Monica won't even come close. Here's Daily Press Editor-in-Chief Matt Hall.
A municipality, a city itself, we're not actually building the housing, right? A city has to set up this legislative framework for developers to build that housing. So for that developer, it still has to be profitable for them. And we just went through these fires. Inflation has hit construction costs. There are factors afoot that may make it infeasible for a developer to commit to some of these projects. And we're kind of already seeing that a little bit. The vacancy rate is a term for the number of units that are physically empty at any given time. And here in Santa Monica, that's increased 5-fold in the last few years. Pre-pandemic, we were at like 2-ish%. Post-pandemic, we're at 10-ish%. That number is actually higher in new builds. So at what point do the developers decide this just isn't going to work for us? We don't know. There's a danger to the municipalities if that does happen, because while you don't have to build the housing yourself, if you don't set up that framework that gets it built, there are more penalties that come in, forcing people to do something. And when we talk about forcing, that is what is being done. As we record this right now, the governor has on his desk a bill that would further remove authority from local municipalities. That's the push. It's a push away from local control and towards forcing this construction to occur where whoever the highest decision maker thinks it should occur.
The loss of local zoning control is broadly unpopular. It also doesn't really feel like the type of progressive blue state policy that has made California famous. This is former city council member Phil Brock.
The state bearing down and saying, screw your options. Here's what we're going to tell you to do. That doesn't go well with a lot of residents, not only here, but other cities throughout the state. And I think that's an overall political problem. The state is becoming more moderate, and I don't want the state to become Republican. I'm a lifelong Democrat.
Here's local architect and slow growth advocate Mario Fonda Bonardi.
Where does the threat to the blue wall come from in a state like California? It comes from the overreach of Democratic activists who are ripping out local control in the interest of population increase and having more control. And as they're doing that, they're building basically the argument for a Republican idea that, there should be local control, including all the things, unfortunately, that come with local control under a Republican administration. We're probably not going to get there, but you see what's happening. They are poisoning the brand by this overreach. The brand of the Democratic Party was pretty good in California. People believe it. People are souring on it. It doesn't help the brand when we're not solving real problems.
But even the state can't do much about the national economy. Here's former city council member Gleam Davis.
Sadly, while we have, I think, gotten rid of a lot of the procedural and bureaucratic barriers to building housing, these external factors like the global and national economy, the rise in interest rates, and some of the other factors we've discussed still are tamping down the actual building. We have lots of approved sites in town, but not a lot of building going on. And I know there are projects. You can just drive down any major boulevard in Santa Monica, and you'll see the notice of pending development sign with a lovely picture of what's supposed to go there. But you don't see a lot of those projects going up particularly quickly.
Whether you are for or against the housing element, or state control of local zoning, or density bonus high-rises, or affordable housing or granny flats, the reality is, like high-speed rail, building enough housing for the population of California is likely to take decades, if it ever happens at all.
In Santa Monica, the whole reason we have the city we have now is because we have rent control, which was an attempt to control housing back in the 70s. This is not a new fight. But we had this fight back in the 70s, and here we are again, still arguing about what will solve this housing crisis. People have been at it for all of this time, and we don't really see any evidence that anyone's idea now is going to be more successful than past iterations.
But all of the factors that have depressed housing development haven't stopped the debate about housing, which has become increasingly caustic. In making this podcast, I heard this sentiment so many times, I've given it a catchy name: the backyard brawl. The not in my backyard NIMBYs versus the yes in my backyard YIMBYs. There was a point where this debate was more academic, where there were people in the middle moderating the extremes. But that point seems to have passed.
This is extremely partisan, and there really isn't a middle ground in the local debate anymore. In Santa Monica, people are viewing this in a very binary sense. There is very much a right and wrong. There's a yes and no. There's I'm right and you're wrong. And we have had some particular strains of political activity here that have made that worse. We have had a radicalization of both sides of the debate. We have had points where people who would be moderate or maybe want to seek a middle ground have felt alienated by the side that they felt closest to, and then they have been pushed further and further towards an extreme position.
We are definitely left with the extremes of the debate. When you look at how the debate is being framed, I'll give you an example. There's a certain side of the debate that says anyone who's an R1 is a racist because the R1 neighborhoods were created by redlining, keeping black people out or brown people out or Chinese people out, whatever. So if you're in an R1 neighborhood, de facto, you're a racist, and you should be able to open up your neighborhood to anybody who wants to build anything in your neighborhood. That's one extreme. So, yeah, it has gotten polarized. But remember, we all breathe the same smoggy air. We're all stuck in the same traffic jam. The middle has taken a beating because the middle, which is generally pretty generous and pretty fair, now is being polarized and pushed away. So do you really want to get rid of all the R1 neighborhood? Isn't the R1 neighborhood a place where not the color of your skin, but how green is your wallet that tells you whether you can live in a single-family home versus some sort of econo box? Those are the kind of choices that people are saying and seeing. They see that and they think, well, do I really need that? People don't like the polarization on the whole. They're not comfortable with thinking of their neighbors as enemies.
This toxicity is real. When I was beginning this series, I spoke with a longtime local housing advocate about participating, and she declined because the personal attack she had endured had driven her out of the business altogether. Another prospective participant, this one on the slow growth side, said that I would, quote, make a lot of enemies if I made this podcast.
America as a country, as a culture, has lost the ability to communicate with individuals who people perceive as not like them. It's a national feature of this country at this point. For better or worse, and I think most people would say it's for the worse. But that is the point in time that we are at. People talk in absolutes. They talk in us versus them mentalities. They talk about being under siege and feeling under threat from ideas and people who hold those ideas that they disagree with. And that is exactly what's happening in this debate around housing.
One person who thinks of himself as a rare housing moderate is Phil Brock.
Radicalizing either side is bad. The people who told me over the years, oh my God, you would let that project go forward? Well, if it doesn't do harm to the community, then yes, we need to have, and I said before, cities are not stasis. We're not done in amber. You have to keep growing. You have to keep changing. Trees do it. People do it. Buildings do it. But I think you also have to recognize what's good in your community and hold on to that at the same time. So I believe in moderate growth. I believe in growth that the people of a city will endorse. And the YIMBY movement in Santa Monica is out of that, where they believe, damn it, we got to build, baby, build. The other side says, no, I don't want a spade of earth changed. Well, I think the reality is you're in the middle, and government has to be that moderating force that listens to both sides and comes up with something. You know, life is full of negotiations, and it's the same with YIMBY NIMBY.
But Santa Monica's current city council has not really acted as a moderating force. It has come down firmly on the side of state mandates, which have overridden local control.
What we have experienced here is a continued evolution of the pro-housing debate that has always really been foundational in Santa Monica. And our current council, we have a slightly younger group who've come in, and their approach is incredibly pro-housing, vastly more than even the folks who were one generation back, meaning one council behind them. Once upon a time, the push was, got to build affordable housing. Affordable housing was the thing. Every project had to have affordable housing, and all of the machinations at play were like, how do we make housing affordable? Well, this new group is saying, how do we just build anything? I don't think they particularly care about affordable housing as much as they care about a raw increase in supply.
The city council has a choice. Essentially, do what Sacramento wants you to do, which is not the quality of the housing, not the sustainability of housing, not the resilience of the housing. We just want the numbers. We just want the numbers. And they have a chance to show some resistance, show some balls here, and start to say, look, we don't like our city being run by others. We don't like our city being told what to do. That's not a good path for our city. And so to sort of say to your city council, why don't you do something about this? Well, this one has not shown yet, hopefully they'll come to their senses, has not even shown a glimmer of resistance to this impossible assignment. They just accept and say, nothing we can do.
I get really, really depressed and sad, and I cry about the fact that I'm probably going to grow old in my apartment building. And by the way, we can't save with what we're planning to buy something.
Mayor Lana Negrete does not often agree with her fellow council members when it comes to housing policy and its effects on affordability.
Even in the Pico neighborhood, by what used to be a neighborhood where people could buy a starter home, up against the freeway, it's over $1.5 million. I know because I just looked at a house, just for shits and giggles. I just feel like we're sort of on the surface saying that we're doing this for these reasons. But when you cut into it, that's not what's being served up. It's like frosting on a cake. It's like, it looks like a chocolate cake with sprinkles, but when you cut into it, it's like banana raisin bread, and you're sorely disappointed because it looked like a party on the outside. You cut into it and you're like, oh, I thought this was chocolate chips. It's raisins, goddammit.
In the backyard brawl, NIMBYism is often associated with nostalgia, the "we must preserve our local character" line of thinking. In Santa Monica, this could be called the sleepy beach town position.
We are working on the community outreach for the redevelopment of the Fairmont Hotel, and it's near the North of Montana area in downtown Santa Monica, and I heard the phrase sleepy beach town over and over again.
Tara Borowskis is the executive director of Santa Monica Community Corporation.
And I think there is a set of people who kind of subscribe to that nostalgia. This is how Santa Monica used to be, sleepy beach town, and that's what we want. Look, I understand that, sounds lovely. I don't personally agree that we were ever a sleepy beach town. That's just me. But I also think the missed opportunity is thinking about where we could go, and that's not always going to be a bad thing. I mean, the times are changing. There's nothing we can do about that. So to kind of plant your flag on the I want it to be the way it used to be, that's just a missed opportunity to get on the bus and try to make the change positive.
Many NIMBYs are also longtime residents of a community and expect their opinions to carry extra weight. Urban planners have a word for this. That word is localism. The idea that people who have lived in a place for a long time believe they've earned a sort of seniority that makes their feelings on an issue more important than those of more recent arrivals. Here's Gleam Davis.
During the time I was on council, so many people came up to me and said, why is it when someone stands up to speak, the first words out of their mouth is, I've lived in Santa Monica X number of years, as if that gives them more of a right to speak than someone who's been here 3 minutes. And I think that's really interesting. They did a survey a few years ago in connection with economic development. And what they discovered was that the people who had moved here the most recently really loved Santa Monica because they moved here despite all the problems we all can talk about. And they said, no, that's where I want to move. That's where I want to raise my family. That's where I want to be. And so they're really big supporters, whereas some people who've been here a while and may have nostalgia for the old days, maybe are a little less enthusiastic. But people seem to think that if they've lived here a very long time, that means their opinion should hold more weight. And in all honesty, I respect the people who were born and raised here, second, third generation, lived here 50 years. Great, wonderful. You have a right to an opinion, and I want to hear it. But let's not shut out the opinion of other people just because they may not have been here as long.
If NIMBYism leverages the past, YIMBYism harnesses visions of the future. With streets full of driverless cars and apartment buildings made out of recycled shipping containers, theirs is a world of high-density, walkable neighborhoods and transit-oriented development.
People love the jargon. People love that, when the planners talk about these things, it makes it sound like they're cast in stone. Transit-oriented development. If we cluster everybody around the light rail stops or the bus stops, Do you really want to live on Pico? Is it really the best place to live? You want to live right on those noisy streets with all the pollution and the ambulances running by to the hospitals? Yeah, that's where we'll put you. We'll put you right there on the transit-oriented corridors. That's the tooth fairy, the development tooth fairy.
Both sides often fall victim to something that the historian Timothy Snyder calls the politics of inevitability. They are so consumed by what they want, they can overlook the potential negative byproducts of those choices. Anti-development crusaders downplay the ill effects of an underhoused society on homelessness and diversity. High-density housing advocates disregard the problems created by increased car traffic, or the stretching of resources like garbage collection, law enforcement, or the water system. And the two sides never seem to occupy the common ground.
I think the problems with the NIMBYs and the YIMBYs, where they're not meeting in the middle, is trying to get into a more detailed or nuanced conversation. A lot of times I find, even as someone who's a staunch housing advocate, that there are legitimate things that we need to talk about. People have real fears about certain things. For example, somebody building a big building and then not taking care of it and not managing it right. If there is permanent supportive housing that's not being well managed, that can spill over into the neighborhood. That's a legitimate concern. So we want to make sure we listen to that and we hear that. I also think we need to talk a little more specifically about what more dense housing can look like and work through some of those fears or challenges. People are really surprised. Sometimes on tours, I'll ask people, how many units per acre do you think this building is? And they'll say, 20. And I tell them 100, and they just can't believe it. So I think part of it is just really kind of digging into those dialogues is an area of opportunity for us here in Santa Monica. I think we have to be careful not to just kind of lump into camps and categorize things as all development is bad or all people who don't like housing are bad.
Journalists tend to be cynical. There tends to be a point where our work drives us down a certain path, and I think there are certain personality types that are drawn to that mindset anyway, of which I am definitely a part of. So one of the things that I think occurs is that people are born into ignorance. We don't know what we don't know. We can't know anything unless we learn it. We are naturally ignorant of all things. But learning requires work, and quite specifically, learning requires an ability to say that you're wrong, and it requires an ability to admit that you didn't know something, and it requires an ability to endure pain, because the process of growing and learning is painful. However, many people are lazy. They do not want to endure the pain. And what we encounter in this debate and in many others is that fear of learning, the laziness, the inability or unwillingness to put in the work causes people to fail to understand the full implications of their position. And they may not even agree with the full implications down the line. They just never thought about it properly.
This podcast is brought to you in part by St. John's Women's Health and Wellness Institute in Santa Monica. Experience care designed by women, for women, in a 7,000 square foot women-centric facility that blends medical expertise with education and holistic support. Whether you need well women exams, maternity care, mental health resources, or educational workshops, Providence St. John's has you covered, with your own patient navigator and commitment to empowering you through every stage of life. Call 833-34-HER and make your health a priority.
When you advertise in the Santa Monica Daily Press, you're doing two things at once: supporting local journalism and putting your business in front of the most engaged audience in town. Our readers live, work, and spend here. Print, web, and newsletters, we are trusted by thousands every single day. That means your ad drives calls, clicks, and customers while showing your commitment to the community. Support local news, grow your business. Advertise with the Santa Monica Daily Press. So, with all of this rancor, how do we move forward? Starting from the place that we all generally want the same things: health, happiness, a nice place to call home. I asked everyone I interviewed for their suggestions for fixing housing development, their visions of a successful future. This is what they said. First, Mayor Lana Negrete.
This is crazy, okay? And some person who's much smarter than me that's like studied urban housing and development is going to comment at some point when this is out that I'm a total dum-dum, and they're probably right about this, but this is what I'm going to say. You have to build communities. And if it's truly about not having enough places for people to live, then we should be looking at open land and building communities. If it's about a population of people who are unfortunately, have some sort of chemical dependency and mental health issues, why aren't we building spaces to teach them and rehabilitate people how to grow their own food sustainably and live in a community and give them all the services and resources to then go out into the community to live in the world? Why are we doing this Band-Aid weird thing where the only people it's serving is those financially invested in it? Those selling the tools, the labor, those are the people making fucking millions of dollars off of this housing crisis. And yet we're not solving a problem. The problem is getting worse. It's spreading like a cancer everywhere. So I think what's so bizarre is if this is about putting roofs over people's heads, we could do some things that might sound like communism. I don't know. But if it's every person's right to have a roof over their head, then we should make it so.
Former City Council member Phil Brock.
I want us not to be afraid to take chances. And it's not just about, we're going to create a walking street or put more bollards in the ground. It's that capacity to think outside the box and decide what else can we do to enhance the facilities in the city. Look at those amusements that keep your children, your teens, and your seniors happy. Give them places to go. Give them places that are vibrant. Here, you want to make me like the building where PS3 was? Put a bowling alley on the first floor. Not Lucky Strike, but a real bowling alley. It's one of the things that's not just for Milwaukee. It's good for cities all over. When we lose those things, we're not fighting to either keep them or find ways to relocate them and make them even more popular.
Former City Council member and housing advocate Gleam Davis.
I think we really need to sort of rethink the fundamentals of our housing market. Everybody should have access to housing. And when you start from that place and you all sort of buy into that, then you fix all the bureaucratic limitations. You say, is this interfering with getting to that goal? Instead, what we do is we sort of view how big, how tall, and this and that and the other thing, and what percentage is going to be deed restricted, and what are the setbacks. And we lose sight of the goal of making sure everyone's house. So that's the first thing. And I think the second thing, and this is really what I discovered when I went to Vienna, was I went there to learn about why they were so successful at building housing. And what I discovered is because they're not focused on building housing, they're focused on building community. They call in the people for the public meeting who are likely to live in the development, not the people who are going to live next door to it and don't want to see it go up next door. They talk to the people who are going to live and say, what do you need? What should it look like? What will make your life better? And I just thought that was the most remarkable thing, because then you have this real sense of community among the people who live in these developments.
Santa Monica Community Corporation's Tara Borowskis.
My grandparents came from Eastern Europe right after World War II to Chicago, and they had a really interesting situation where there were single-family homes that people were sharing. So there would be 2 single-family homes on a lot, and there would be a family on the first floor and a family on the second floor. So there were actually 4 families living on one lot. And they were really happy, and they had picnics together and did things together. And it sort of reminds me of the way Europe is more, where density is celebrated and people use that opportunity to build communities, pop over to their neighbors' houses. And I think we're really missing an opportunity by creating this more isolationist kind of here's my fiefdom and that kind of thing. So I do think it could be reimagined. I think it would just take people maybe looking at some of the different models, and certainly some of us do that and have, but it would be great for more people to open their minds to that. I also think people can start to look at tiny homes and things where we can live a little more modestly and have maybe less individual space and more common space. Modular housing is certainly, I think, very promising. We are trying our own building right now, doing that to try to figure out how do we bring down costs. We could look at 3D printing. I don't know if you've seen one. I've seen a 3D printed house. It's a small, tiny home, but I was like, it's possible. So I think it's not going to be one silver bullet. It's going to be a lot of things, but I think we have to get comfortable with a little more density.
Architect and slow growth advocate Mario Fonda Bonardi.
We have more choices in our urban layout. All this super dense housing, we're building housing that people really don't want to live in. They may be forced to live in it. They may not have a choice about it, but they don't want to live in this housing that's being built. You don't want to live in an econo box. That's not a life for a human. That's for a rat or a bee. All the little hives, the little cells are exactly the same. So slow growth, I'm proud to wear that label. But slow growth is real growth. It's really what can we afford to sustain indefinitely? That's the question. Are you consuming water faster than it's being created? The moment you're in that imbalance, now you're unsustainable. And then it's just a question of when do you collapse? And so if you take that into the cityscape, what it comes down to is we cannot afford to build buildings taller than 3 or 4 stories and make them net zero buildings, meaning they generate as much energy as they need for air conditioning, those computers, all those things that require power. Where do we get that power? The best way to get it is to get it locally from your rooftop. Put the solar collectors up there, you get the power you need. So slow growth means living within our means and also using all the things we have a little more efficiently to extend the time before they start to really collapse. Our limitation is imagination at a certain point, but also willing to consider the really difficult choices, not from hey, oh my God, if we don't do this, it's going to be a disaster and it's going to be horrible. But if we don't do this, we're missing this great opportunity. And then we will slide into that disaster because we didn't do this. That's a different way of looking at it rather than think, oh, it's gloom and doom. We can't solve it. We're fucked. Sorry.
Daily Press publisher and fellow producer of this podcast, Ross Furukawa.
So in my early 20s, I moved to Aspen, Colorado, which I know sounds really bougie, but there's actually a lot of people there that are just like us. I mean, they're at work and they're there to start their career. Just like in Santa Monica, housing is expensive there. It's some of the most expensive real estate in the country. But there's a need for housing. There's a need for affordable housing and workforce housing. I think out here in Los Angeles, we're looking at rentals only, and we are looking at qualification for those rentals. And there's no long-term plan. You're kind of locked into this rental situation. So what they've done in Aspen and Vail and Beaver Creek and all of the ski resort areas in Colorado is they've created deed-restricted, managed by the government, employee housing units you can rent or you can buy. The rent works just like deed-restricted rentals here. Like it's a lower rent and you have to qualify with a certain income. If you're going to buy a unit, it does a couple things. Number one, pride of ownership, right? You own that unit. But the way that it becomes affordable is there are government programs for the lending, but the units are deed restricted to 3% per year. In other words, the value of the property is limited to 3% a year. And everybody, including myself, that bought a deed restricted unit when they were there, eventually moved into a market rate unit. Because after a few years, it's appreciated by 3% every year, and you've built equity. You've had that forced savings plan, and you've gotten this tax benefit. So it's a really good system of getting people into home ownership, getting people into affordable housing, and kind of solves that entry point problem.
And last, Daily Press editor-in-chief Matt Hall.
When folks have criticized California for its housing crisis, and in some cases justifiably so, I think what they miss is that they themselves may be on the same doomed train that we are already on. Where is the nation being led? What's the end result of this path? Maybe we're being led straight to hell, right? Because I don't see how this gets solved with our current political, societal, emotional conflicts that the country is in. Because you can't reconcile some of these ideas. So unless there is some great national reckoning that provides communities with a renewed sense of community identity and a renewed focus on a consistent and unified approach, it's not going to get solved. I am someone who enjoys fantasy and science fiction, and so in the world of fantasy, there is a trope about how order is drawn from chaos. And you look at these classic stories of a knight embarking on a great quest, and oftentimes there's the idea that as the knight progresses through the realm, as he passes his tests, and he's always looking for the next challenge, he gets to the end of the realm. He stands on this point of land, gazing out into the void beyond. And that last final great quest is an act of sacrifice. It's you stick your sword into the ground and declare, I am here, I exist, I stand against the void in front of me, and in doing so, carves out another foot of land. And that's it. That's all you get. The grand story ends with 12 inches of dirt being added to the realm that nobody knows you did. That's what makes it the heroic sacrifice. There's no grand parade, there's no celebration, there's no plaque erected anywhere to it. There's just more dirt to stand on. And that's kind of how big ideas probably should progress in real life. We just need to make the progress on the work. And what I fear is that we're not making incremental progress. That all that's happening is the bluster and ego and arrogance of the debates actually preclude us from getting to that point where even the small steps are being taken that move us towards the greater good.
This was the 6th and final episode of A Developing Story. I want to take a moment to thank some people who made this series possible. First, to my fellow producers, Daily Press publisher Ross Furukawa, who bought into my crazy idea and was the series' biggest cheerleader, and editor-in-chief Matt Hall, who was an endless source of information and encouragement and knows how to tell a hell of a great story, which is no small gift. Also, a huge shout out to the amazing Alan Kraut for editing and mixing the series. Second, projects like this are made by a coalition of the willing. So many people and organizations said no, or more often, didn't respond to my interview requests. These are the amazing people who said yes. Mayor Lana Negrete, Phil Brock, Mario Fonda Bonardi, Gleam Davis, Tara Borowskis, Darren Domang. I am eternally grateful to all of you. Please consider rating and reviewing the series. If you'd like to comment or leave a question, you can do so when you review the series, or you can email us at podcast@smdp.com. If we get enough comments and questions, we'll release a bonus episode in which Matt, Ross, and I respond to those. Until then, thanks for listening.
A Developing Story is a limited podcast series from Santa Monica Daily Press. The series was created, written, and hosted by Brian Peter Falk. The series was produced by Brian, Matthew Hall, and Ross Furukawa. It was edited and mixed by Alan Kraut. Original music by Brian and Alan. If you have a question or comment, you can email the series at podcast@smdp.com.